So before I begin, I've never been to one of these things, and it's kind of humbling but inspiring at the same time, and kind of daunting. So take me a few minutes to get used to it. But it's really amazing. I feel like I've been out of the scene for a while to see so many people interested in entrepreneurship, and so many young people allow me to use that term without being offensive. But it's really inspiring, and congratulations to you for convening such a crowd. It's very cool.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it. And I mean, thank you for being here. It's a real privilege to have you. So thank you.
Okay, so who am I? I prefer not to be identified purely just by what I do. So I'm Adam, born and raised in Ethiopia. I spent about 15 years outside the country. I left when I was about 15, and in 91. I left when I was when the government was changing in 1991. I went to the United Kingdom, where I finished my high school. And after that, I went to college in the United States on the East Coast, to a university called Brown University. And then I worked in the East Coast in Boston and New York for about 5 years before I came back to Ethiopia in 2003. So now I'm in my 16th year back. I'm probably still referred to as a diaspora. I don't know when I'm going to lose that title, but I'm one of those. I've got 3 kids. 2 of them are upstairs there. And I run a company called Apposit, which is a technology company. However, the reason I came back to Ethiopia, or when I came back rather, it wasn't to start Apposit. I came back for a few reasons. One, Ethiopia's home, and I always felt it was home. To a certain extent, I didn't feel at home in the other places I lived. And I kind of knew that if I didn't give it a shot, I would regret it. So that was one. Second was I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I studied economics, but professionally I was in the tech sector. I started my career at a company called Anderson Consulting at the time. It's now called Accenture. And then I worked for a number of startups, but pretty much in the technology space as a software engineer. And I remember sitting in New York, our offices were in Times Square, and trying to think 5 or 10 years in the future. And I thought to myself, this is probably not what I want to be doing. So I said, I want to go back home and I want to be an entrepreneur. And the third thing that was important to me also was to be close to my family, which live in Ethiopia. We used to get, you always get phone calls when you're in the States, and I don't know about other people, but I didn't get phone calls. Well, rather, when I got phone calls, my heart would kind of skip for a minute with the fear that it might be some bad news. And so I always said to myself, one day it is going to be bad news, and I'm going to look back at what I've accomplished in the United States, and I'm pretty sure that it's not going to have been worth it. So those are the 3 reasons I came back to Ethiopia. So 16 years and counting. It's the longest I've been actually in one place since I've kind of been independent enough to determine where I live. Yeah. So I guess that's saying something. Anyway, when I first came back, the business that I decided I was going to launch was an alternative energy business, solar energy. And the reason is kind of random as well. We had traveled as a family to Israel, I think in 1984, and my father had brought back a solar water heater, which we had on our house, and not many people had them at the time, so I thought that was really cool. So I said, yeah, there's lots of sun there, and not many people have solar water heaters, so let me do solar water heating. So I spent a number of months researching. I figured it out, and I packed everything up and was on my way to Ethiopia. My last trip before I actually finally came. And on that trip, I was introduced to somebody. He was working for Harvard University, and he was running a project at the Ministry of Finance. And he said, I need some help evaluating some of the stuff we've been doing. So I said, okay, sure, I can do that. Anyway, that assignment turned into 4 years at the Ministry of Finance. So the first 4 years I was back here, I was working for Harvard University implementing public financial management systems for the government. Sounds very boring when you say it like that, but what we did basically was build the budgeting, the accounting, and the cash management systems that the government of Ethiopia uses till this day. So that's where I started. We could talk a little bit more about that if you're interested later on, but
Just quickly on that, like we had someone here who mentioned, so 16 years ago, it wasn't like the internet speed we have now, which isn't exactly super fast, but back then it was like when you send an email, all the emails, they wait until till it all comes together, and then they press one button and it sends all the emails from the country out at one time. It couldn't have been easy at that time when you go into a government office trying to build the systems and databases and all of that. When you came back, were you very quickly like, maybe I'll return sooner than I think? Or how was that when you're trying to set these things up?
not at all, actually. And I think I attribute that to youthful exuberance and probably not knowing better. But it serves you, and I think it could serve everybody here as you're trying to start businesses. What you don't know doesn't scare you, so just jump into it. So that's kind of what we did, and luckily I was fortunate enough to have enough experience, but also to have enough people around me to make what we did successful. And actually, I think what we did there was really interesting. So talking about the internet, or even mobile phones, they were limited. They're probably, I don't know. To get a mobile phone, you had to know somebody, you had to have a business. Yeah, it was very difficult. So if you had a mobile phone, you were definitely special. And internet was on dial-up. So
people here don't know what that is, right? Dial-up?
Yeah.
Google it, dial-up.
Yeah. But what we did in that environment was build an internet-based application to run the government's finances. So that in itself was pretty bold. I was speaking a couple of weeks ago at Design Week, and I was talking about this. But a lot of people, when I tell them what we do, will often ask, how can you do tech or sophisticated tech in Ethiopia with telecommunications being such a barrier? And the fact is, myself, the people I work with, have never really thought of it as a barrier. It's just something that you have to design for. And I think this is really important with any business in Ethiopia. We have to design products for Ethiopia. We have to innovate in Ethiopia. We can't rely on just importing technologies or importing products. I believe that you really have to design products for Ethiopia. So that's what we did. And it was successful. So in 4 years, we basically automated almost the entire country with the exception of a few people, a few regions. A few people. But basically, this application would work on, there was this infrastructure at the time called Waradan.net, which was a big infrastructure project that was implemented by the government. They put VSAT satellites in every qabale in the country. And that VSAT satellite would provide internet or network connectivity in every qabale. And so in certain regions, we proved that this application from the qabale, which probably in most places you probably can't even drive to, they can just open a web browser and use these applications. Anyway, there's a lot of other innovations in there that made it work, and some of them aren't necessarily technical. Like when you innovate, it doesn't have to be very sophisticated. One of the most important innovations was we said, okay, if we're trying to roll these things out across the country, we have to think about supporting them, because it's not just putting something out there, you have to support them. And with our capacity, with the infrastructure, we couldn't support everywhere. So we actually drew a line at some administrative structure, in most cases at the zonal level, and we said, okay, below the zone, it's not going to be automated. Above the zone, it's going to be automated. And that made sense. I mean, obviously it's a trade-off, but it made sense in the situation, and it worked. Most important thing about innovation is it has to work. And when we say it has to work well. I think any product, for it to be accepted and used, it has to work. And oftentimes I think as people in Ethiopia, I should say, we accept less than what we should. And we really have to strive for excellence in the products. And that's how you're going to be successful. So when you innovate, main thing is it has to work.
Yeah. That's huge. I think already there's a whole bunch of wisdom and insights that are profound for wanting to set up business. Even just the attitude. Someone can come to Ethiopia 16 years ago and go straight back because people come now interested in IT and go straight back, let alone back then. And so just the attitude and approach to the way of doing that. And then second, I think there's a big thing of trying to bring outside solutions in an outside way to Ethiopia when actually we're very different. We love to say we were never colonized. I say that 100 times to visitors whenever they come. But actually that makes us so unique, right? And so actually the solutions that we come up with have to be unique to the challenges that we see. Some of you are looking at me like, never colonized Abashana? I am half Abasha, so I feel I can actually say that. But that's a really fascinating thing to see how the solutions here and innovation here has to be from here. So that's huge. So the company now, tell us a little bit about it. I think it was when I was doing research. Everybody knows of the ECX. Everything goes through that, but actually you guys were involved in setting that up as well from the tech end, right?
Yeah, so let me connect the work we did at the Ministry of Finance with how we set up Apposit. The entire time we were working there was kind of competing interests to bring in foreign systems like an Oracle or an SAP or something like that. And we always felt that was not the right solution. So we built everything from scratch here. And like I said, what we always said is we're building, what Ethiopia needs is a Toyota, not a Mercedes. And so we were building that Toyota. Anyway, what we took away from the work there was a need for what we called, at the time, appropriate technology or stuff for Ethiopia or for Africa built in Africa. And that's, when we finished that project, that's how we started our company, Apposit, which comes from the word apposit, which is apposit with an E at the end, which means suitable or appropriate. And so our whole kind of ethos was, like as I've been mentioning, let's build stuff for Africa. So we started out as a consultancy, basically building software for other people. ECX was one of our very early clients. And what we did was I think we built one of the first SMS and IVR. IVR is interactive voice response, or these automated telephone systems. So we built the first SMS and IVR system in the country, which was a market data platform for the Ethiopia Commodity Exchange. And what it allowed was anybody from the public to access the market information from the exchange, either by SMS or by IVR. It's still active. And it also allows the members of the exchange, so the people trading on the exchange, to get information about their business, and so forth. So that was interesting. I remember that was actually, like most things, it's put out to a tender. At the time, our company was probably about maybe 6 people. And even before the tender was done, we thought that our best chance was to just build it. And when we were asked to come and, tell them what we were planning on doing, we were just going to show them that we'd built the whole thing already. So there were many, many nights, and all of us. So I started Apposit with 2 partners. There's 4 partners now, but I started with 2 partners who are very close friends of mine. And I remember very late nights. And at the time, I was still programming. So we basically built the thing and went to the ECX, and we won that contract. So that was exciting. That kind of gave us some profile. And interestingly, that piece of software that we built for the ECX, I think we use in every single thing we do today. So it's quite interesting.
No way.
Yeah. But what we do today, over the years, we've kind of evolved. We describe what we do as building technology that powers innovative and high-impact businesses in Africa. So there's a couple of things that are important to us. Innovation is important, and impact is important. So we want to be working in businesses that are affecting millions of people. And to a large extent, I think we have been, and increasingly we are becoming successful in that regard. But today we would describe ourselves more as a product company. And we're focused in three main areas. One is financial services. So somebody was mentioning CBE Burr. We're in the same space, but for the past 10 years, we've been working in Nigeria and not in Ethiopia. So that's a big part of our business. I'll speak a little bit more about that if you're interested. And then we do a lot of work in agriculture. And in all these cases, we're really applying technology to improve processes and systems in the sectors that we work in. So we do a lot of work in agriculture. The biggest thing that we're doing is we're helping the government sell fertilizer and inputs to farmers using technology. In fact, it's completely paperless. We've put smartphones in the hands of farmers, and we've given them what are called NFC chips, or near field communications. They're a small radio chip that you're very familiar with it if you think about tap and pay, or like your Apple Pay or Google Play, where you just touch something. That technology we use to sell fertilizer to farmers in Ethiopia. And I live it, so it's not that new. But if you actually think about what it's doing, it's pretty amazing. So there are times when again, you can't walk to these places. You gotta park your car, walk over a few rivers. There is mobile connectivity, and then you see farmers transacting with these pretty sophisticated technologies, and it's really cool. And all that was also, completely innovated. You kind of have to innovate around the problems you have, such as no connectivity. For 3 months, if you remember, I think it was last year, internet was shut off completely, right at the peak of the fertilizer buying season. And fertilizer is very important and very political, so you can't afford to have the system down for any amount of time. But luckily, it worked seamlessly, and then when internet was turned back on, everything kind of just flew back in. And so that's that. We do a lot of work in agriculture, and then the third thing we do is in retail. So we work with fast-moving consumer goods companies to help them manage what they call their route to market, or their sales activities. You'd recognize them in these trucks that go around delivering product. The problem the companies have is basically once that truck leaves the building, they really don't know what it's doing, where it's going, who it's selling to, and so forth. And increasingly, if you think about water, I think there's probably 80 water companies in Ethiopia. To a large extent, it's commoditized. You don't care if you're drinking Wow or Arki or whatever.
So many.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you think about competition for these companies, in the future, it's about their brand, but also, very importantly, their relationship with their customers, which are the shops that they sell to and you and I go and buy from. So without being able to manage their sales force well, our view, and a lot of our clients would attest to the same thing, is they're not going to win in this market because it's becoming increasingly competitive. So briefly, those are
amazing. I think what I find so fascinating about hearing Adam speak and the problems they're solving is almost these are the legitimate problems that we see in the country, whether it's financial services or with agriculture, particularly with agriculture. If you know the setup of the country, 80% of the population is smallholder farmers, right? And maybe even more. And actually, so many big brands and companies are sitting on the edge of Ethiopia just going, when that population is plugged into being able to earn money and grow, this country is going to be like a big force to be reckoned with globally. Basically, economies and countries' strength is going to be on population size. And so the moment those people can earn money is truly a game changer. And so I'm fascinated both with that and also seeing the problem with connecting retailers with the product. I think an entrepreneur at its core is seeing a problem and providing a solution. But I think some of the challenges for us entrepreneurs is we jump at the glamorous problems. Do you know what I mean? Or maybe the easiest solutions to solve, or we watch stuff online, we love the idea of being this cool entrepreneur, and actually probably maybe don't solve the biggest problems that need solving. So I'd love to ask the question around how did you even discover that these were some of the biggest challenges and problems, and that you could have almost the audacity to create big solutions for them that are actually impacting society? So long-winded question, essentially asking, how did you find the problem?
I think I'd be lying if I said we sat down and went through a process and came out with an idea at the end of it. You know, one thing leads to another. We used to have a product, again, that we built off that platform that we'd built for the Ethiopia Commodity Exchange. So what we built for the Ethiopia Commodity Exchange, if you think about it, is it allows you to send and receive data through different channels. SMS, IVR, web, anything. So we thought, okay, let's apply that to different sectors. So we did a number of projects with different donors, some in agriculture, some in health. For example, very simple, we used to work with a health institution that collected information on malaria from across the country. Every week, how many people came in with malaria? Was it this type? Was it this type? Were they men, women, children, blah, blah, blah. And getting that information in the past, if you think about it, was paper-based. By the time it gets to you, it's 2 weeks, it's kind of out of date, then you have to collate it, blah, blah, blah. So we built a platform that allowed people to collect this information and get it kind of in real time. So the agriculture stuff, for example, we worked with an organization called TechnoServe, and they were working in the coffee sector, and we were helping them basically collect information from farmer cooperatives about how much coffee came in, how much was paid for it on the day, how much they paid for labor, and so forth. And they used that information to run their operations. So that kind of led us into the agriculture sector. Similarly, in the retail market, BGI, so St. George Beer, Castel and Castel Winery and so forth, they came to us and they said, oh, we have this problem. We said, great, we got this platform, we can use it. So we built it for them. We ended up discontinuing that platform because we wanted to focus more, which is something really important that if I don't remember, remind me to come back to. So we stopped being a generic platform for data collection, and we picked 2 use cases, one in agriculture and then the Salesforce. Agriculture we picked because, like you said, 80% of the population's in agriculture. We thought that it's really important, really impactful, and we can kind of meet our impact goals with that. So that's how we chose the 2. The work in financial services, well, we fell for the sexy idea. Yeah, I mean.
So it's in Nigeria. You're servicing a product in Nigeria.
Yeah.
So they're essentially outsourcing their work to Ethiopia.
Yeah. So that's another.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's a great story, and I only think it's a great story when I hear myself saying it. But yeah. So 10 years ago, we hooked up with an entrepreneur in Nigeria by the name of Tayo, and he wanted to build. He wanted to get rid of cash in Nigeria and make it easy for people to use money. So he initially contracted us to advise him on technology. Long story short, we ended up building all his technology for him. So the company is called Paga. It's celebrating 10 years now. It's the largest mobile payments provider in Nigeria.
Wow. That's worth applause. That the biggest payment system in Nigeria is outsourcing their work, or a lot of their work
so
here.
All their technology, design, build, support is done from Ethiopia. Yeah,
that is crazy.
So yeah, tell that to people who think we don't have infrastructure.
Yeah. That's so inspiring, and that's the dream, really, that a whole bunch of countries outsource to here because we are the best at doing it, right? Who's going to create some products that, man, oh man.
So yeah, big company. We have 12 million customers on our platform. I don't know how many of you know about the mobile money, but a big part of that is also how many agents you have. So where you can go to get cash, to put cash onto your account, or to take cash out. So currently we're at about 19,000 agents. We've transacted over $3 billion. That's a B. Through the platform in the 10 years. So yeah, and all that is built by Ethiopian engineers.
Those numbers can kind of skim over your head. Those numbers are big and truly, truly inspiring. And so right now you're still servicing them, and what are the projects you're working on now? Is it similar stuff, and why don't you do the system here?
Yeah. So we don't do projects anymore. We're more, like I said, a product company. Yeah, we're very closely aligned with that company. So over the years, we realized, instead of making everything contractual, we should just be fully invested. So we're also shareholders in that company. So we consider ourselves one and the same. Why do we not do it in Ethiopia? Good question. We did try to do it about 6 years ago. And at the time, the regulatory environment we didn't feel was conducive enough, or for that matter, the market itself in the right place for us to lose focus of Nigeria. That was 6 years ago. Obviously now we're taking a much closer look, and hopefully we'll be bringing that to Ethiopia very soon as well.
Amazing. There's something I really take away from the growth of the company or the success of the company, and that's almost plugging into others who have the idea or are working on something. So it doesn't always necessarily have to be your idea. And I think we see a lot of successful businesses see a huge organization or company and say, what's your need and how can I serve it? And so for some of you thinking about what problem can I solve, look around the city. We see construction everywhere. What are their biggest needs? Do we know? Many of us wouldn't know. Or what are some of the biggest industries, whether it's coffee or sesame seeds or now teff? Or do we know what needs exist within those industries and potentially what we could do to service them, right? And simply by just widening your awareness or knowledge of what the problem is, it may just plant a seed of the potential of how you could service it in a commercial and sustainable way by creating a business, right? That's the thing I quickly take away and begin thinking, wow, like it's not just creating another graphics design company or another, just another thing that already exists there. And this innovation, I think, is huge. I think one of the things that it also challenges is when one hair salon is created on this side of the street, suddenly 3 are created on the opposite side of the street, rather than saying, okay, maybe what else can complement that business? And so we are desperate for innovation. And so I don't want us to just skim over that, of the need for us to actually think, how can we innovate, not just look at what someone else is doing and then say, I wish I could do that, but better, right? Amazing. So I'd love you to talk into the future a little bit, Adam. You're someone who is an innovator, an entrepreneur who came at a more than challenging time and is still here and still operating and succeeding. As you look into the future, and we have a room full of people who I hope and pray are going to be the game changers of the future too, what kind of thing would you say to them, encourage them, inspire them?
Well, let me start with our future. So we've seen, and this is the way I think, the way we think. I was alluding to it earlier. I think to be successful as an entrepreneur going forward, where it's going to be more competitive, you really have to add serious value. You have to have enough. And this value has to be orders of magnitude above the way people do things now. The reason I say that is for you to change somebody's behavior, what you're offering has to be not just a little bit better, it has to be 10 times better. Nice. And to get 10 times better at anything, you really have to work hard at it. It just doesn't happen. I think in Ethiopia, we've been lucky enough that demand far outstrips supply. So you do anything, you got 5 hair salons, they're all going to be busy. But I think that's going to change. And I think we have to, as entrepreneurs, think how we're different and how we're really creating value, different from somebody else. And not just copying, but innovating, doing something different. So for us, the future is more focus. So we used to do maybe, 10 projects at a time. Now we have 3 products. In the future, that's going to be one thing. And a simple reason, focus. There's limited resources. Even in our company, there's some resources that are just limited. Some of the very senior people, hard to find. And so we believe that if all those people were focused on one thing, we'd go further and faster, we go much faster than if we were trying to do 3 things. So that's kind of how we think. I know at the same time in Africa, and I say Africa generally, where things don't work quite as well, you kind of have, a lot of people do 2 or 3 businesses. It's kind of normal. Maybe that's a coping mechanism. That's not how we think, and I think in the future it'll change.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the thing about focus is a lot of people don't focus. So if you do focus, you inherently have a competitive advantage than the person next to you. And I think you see it paying off. Unfortunately here, we don't have many success stories. We don't have some stories of a young entrepreneur that's made it big. I think if a few are popping up on the side, on the scene. I feel like Ride is kind of there. I don't know how many people came with Ride or used Ride today. This is just an informal poll.
Yeah,
I'm
out of
interested.
interest. Who came with Ride?
Anybody use Ride today?
Amazing. Cool.
Okay. But I mean, I've been in circles where 60-70% of the people turn up in Ride. And Ride is kind of in our language. So that inspires me, and I hope it inspires other people. I think it's a good example for young entrepreneurs to look up to. Those are a couple of, I think those are some thoughts for the future.
Amazing. I don't want to be selfish with just the questions, so we're going to open up the floor in a minute to hear some of your questions shortly. So be thinking about some questions you guys might have. When you look at the market, before opening it up, what opportunities do you see? Whether it's someone who's just moved here or someone who's, before coming here, the seed was planted when I watched someone talk on a video about setting up a business. And I thought, wow, maybe I can one day come back and set up a business. So there's people watching right now, there's people here, there's people who have never gone abroad. What opportunities do you see for businesses to come in and solve and set up?
The problem has never been a lack of opportunities. In fact, the abundance of opportunities is the problem, because you think you can do everything and you end up not doing anything. So pick anything, it's an opportunity there. I mean,
that's great.
Nothing's been done really.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think you really have to innovate and try to be a little bit different.
Yeah. Brilliant advice. So let's go to the floor. We'll take a handful of questions before drawing it all back in. So let me see your hand, and I'll just point at you and repeat it. Okay. Yes, you over there.
Hi. So you were talking about this big journey that you took, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't all, what they say, alga balga. So you must have had big challenges. So if it's all right with you, I want you to share with us that big mountain, that low point, and what you had to do to overcome it. Thank you.
Interesting. You have highs and lows along the way. My big mountain is Ethiopia. In the sense that I still feel like I'm pushing that big rock up that hill. And being Ethiopian, you're forever hopeful and optimistic. So we're still here. Thankfully, I think there's a change in the air. But I think Ethiopia itself poses an obstacle, because there are so many obstacles to doing business here. There's no two ways of saying that. But I think, you overcome it because you see the opportunity. I mean, if you're Ethiopian, you have that connection. And if you love what you do every day, then you can keep turning up to the office. For us, I'll tell you one obstacle. The private sector in Ethiopia has never been big enough for us to be that interested in it. In other words, private sector never really spent money on technology. Or if they did, it wouldn't be more than 10,000, maybe 20,000 birr, and that's not the market that we wanted to be in. So for many years, private sector was a bit of an obstacle. For the first time with our fast-moving consumer good Salesforce automation, we're engaging directly with the private sector. So especially in fast-moving consumer goods, you've seen a lot of investment coming in. So you have a lot of, there's capital, but there's also expertise that appreciates technology. So one of the first things they do is actually improve their operations and try to invest in technology. So that's a tide of change for us. For the first time, we have seriously viable private sector-led business in Ethiopia. So, the answer is keep at it, keep optimistic, and make sure you're doing something you really love. Frankly, for us, we'd turn up even if we weren't getting paid by anybody, we'd turn up the office every day to do what we do, because that's what excites us. So make sure you love what you do, and stay optimistic. Yeah.
Thank you. My question was about water.net, because you mentioned it, and just how you felt about it politically, because there's a lot written about water.net and its use as a sort of structure of control, and maybe you can then talk more about the nexus of politics and technology in Ethiopia, and how technology can be instrumentalized by certain people. You know. Thank you.
Yeah. There was I don't know if any of you know the African Leadership Academy, or it's based out of South Africa. And I remember they had their opening in Ethiopia, and the founders were talking about the generations. And I think our parents' generation was very political. Our generation is more about prosperity and business and so forth. So, to be honest with you, I don't have much political interest, or I don't think of what I do in a political sense. So I don't really have a political comment on what I do. Technology enabled people to use, to communicate, but they also used it for telemedicine. So like everything, you put it in the right hands, it can be used well. In the wrong hands, it could be used in the wrong way. But generally, I think technology is an enabler. At water.net, I don't know if it's even relevant anymore with mobile communications and so forth. So, I mean, I don't have much political comment on that. Yeah.
Thank you. We love your feedback. We love, we improve each time because of what you say. So there's surveys coming round. So please fill those out. At the bottom is who sponsors that. So go check them out if you need any surveys done in that sense. So maybe I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. So if you have a question, let me just see. Great.
I'm grateful for this opportunity. My question is a quick one. So this tech field, it is more of a teamwork. So how do you keep your team strong? How do you motivate your team? Because I have been there, so many teams fail. So how do you keep the team strong? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really important thing. And I think when you build companies, people oftentimes overlook the soft stuff, such as, motivating people, aligning people around a vision. Too often you're involved in the day-to-day and you forget about that stuff. But it's really important for the longevity and the performance of your company. So I think one of the key ways we do it is we excel at what we do. I'm very fortunate to have partners that are at the top of their game anywhere in the world in what they do. So the technology that we build is really state-of-the-art, but not just the technology, the systems, the processes, and so forth. So for us, I think a big attraction for our employees is that you learn a lot, you're working in a professional environment, and you're doing really cool things. Other than that, I think it's really important for people to see impact in what they're doing, and to find it interesting. So sure, we're building some cool technology on smartphones and stuff, but when our staff go out in the field and really look at the impact and how people are using it, they get excited. So I think that's important. And then finally, I think, a broader vision. Why are you in this? Why do you turn up to work every day? Besides just your paycheck and the cool stuff you're doing, I think it has to mean something for you. And when you recruit your team members and the people you work with, you kind of they have to not be the same, but they have to believe and aspire and value the same things. So the values that you create in your company and so forth are important.
Sorry. Hi, it's very inspiring to have you here. So my question is going to be a bit selfish, and I'm going to ask about a field that I'm interested in, and it's about adaptability of technologies. So we all know that changing behavior is the the most challenging thing to do, changing the behavior of like people, customers. So you said that you worked in the rural areas for ECX and with the Word.net and everything to use a very sophisticated technology. So what do you think is the right approach to actually either train them or introduce them to changing their norms or behavior? And a lot of people have tried, and it's because a lot of businesses fail, is because of the changing behavior part of customers. And what did you do, or what do you think is the best approach to introduce technology into the lives of rural people, especially in Ethiopia?
Yeah, that's a good question. Solve a problem for them and do it well, and make sure you're improving their lives by doing it. So then you're not trying to convince somebody to use something just because you want them to use something. They're using it because it adds value to their life. And I think that's a really difficult part. I think that's where we have a long way to go. So I think it's as simple as that. And like I said before, it has to change behavior. Whatever you're asking them to do has to be orders of magnitude better than what they're doing now. So, you know, the sexy business, the financial services, mobile money, blah, blah. It's sexy, but if you look at how many places in the world it's actually been successful, there are very few. And fortunately and unfortunately, M-Pesa in Kenya is out there. It's just a beacon of success. It's amazing. But you're hard-pressed to find necessarily that many other success cases around the world. Part of the reason is because behavior change. So our biggest competitor to mobile money is not CB Eber or Ember or HelloCash. It's cash itself and people's behavior. So you really have to design so that it's easy and it adds value. Because the reason it's sexy is it's a no-brainer. Oh, I don't have to go to the bank. I always have cash on my phone. You get it immediately. So you think everybody's going to use it. But that's not how it works. And to get it right is hard work, really hard work. It's taken us 10 years in Nigeria. Because if you think about it, it's not just the technology. But for somebody to, let's take mobile money as an example, for somebody to want to make that their default behavior when I want to send you money, a lot of things have to happen and they have to be delightful. So first of all, I have to get cash into my mobile money account, which means that somewhere around me, hopefully within a short walking distance, there has to be an agent or somewhere where I can give them cash so they can put it into my account. When I turn up at their agent, their account has to be funded, so they kind of have to have the ability to change cash into digital money. The technology has to work. And then the person I'm sending it to, they also have to be willing to receive it like that. And for them to be willing to receive it, they also have to find an agent nearby. That agent needs to be able to give them cash. There's a whole value chain. And as a business, operationally, if you think about doing this at scale, it's very difficult to get that right. And then if something goes wrong, you don't want the customer to throw it up and give up. They have to get excellent customer experience. So rather than turning them off, they're actually turned on. Because, I mean, if you're fair, you can't expect everything to work 100% of the time. But when it doesn't work, you have to delight them. So it sounds easy, but if you try to do that as a business at a large scale, it takes a lot of work. So that's the hard part about business. And I think we've been spoiled here where you can just open anything and you probably have more demand than you can supply. But in the future, and especially with these innovative things that you want to get people to change their behavior, you're going to have to be at the top of your game, and you really have to design well. Not just the technology, but the entire user experience. Yeah.
Hello. My question is, you said that you've been working in Nigeria in the financial tech industry. I'm actually a bit puzzled because there's a great opportunity to work in that industry in Ethiopia. So I want to ask, what actually made you to move to Nigeria, and what are actually the problems and the the opportunities actually, as to me or as I know, the financial tech has a great opportunity to flourish in Ethiopia, but you decided that you moved, and so my question is, can you explain your reasons and the opportunities? And the other question, I want to know what you're doing with the data you have. I know that you collect so many data, demographic or whatever. What are you doing with the data to help the government or to make use of it? What are you doing with it?
Okay, so I think when you talk about opportunities in Ethiopia, you have to get beyond headline figures and you need to start unpacking it for your particular business. So you often hear a headline figure of, okay, now it's 103, 105 million people in Ethiopia, 42% under the age of 15, big market, blah. But then for your particular business, as you start unpacking this, that number narrows, right? So if you're, say, if you're looking at, let's take mobile money, and you're actually looking at your addressable market, you look at things such as mobile penetration, you look at some of the use cases such as airtime sales, which is a very common and kind of compelling use case for mobile money. As you break this stuff down in Ethiopia, you'll often find that unless you're selling a 2 or 3 or 5 birr thing to the mass, your market is actually quite small. If by demography, urban, rural, by spending power, as you split this up, the picture is a little bit more nuanced than just big opportunity and so forth. So some of our calculations were there. We just broke it down that way. We looked at the use cases, and it wasn't that compelling. But to be honest with you, the biggest reason 6 years ago when we were evaluating this, that we looked at Ethiopia, not Nigeria, was how conducive it was for us to run the business in Ethiopia the way we wanted to. A lot of that has to do with regulation. And the regulation for a fintech player in Ethiopia in mobile money is not ideal. For example, in Nigeria, our company has its own license to operate as a mobile payments provider. Here in Ethiopia, you have to work with another financial institution, which in itself is not bad, but you are very limited in what you can do. So our value in Paga are our customers, our brand, our agents. That's, if you think about the value in the company, not just the revenue, that's what's valuable. If you think about Facebook and they talk about, all these internet companies, they never made money, but they have millions of users. That's valuable. The regulations in Ethiopia at the time and even now don't allow you as a fintech player to capture that value. So as a business, when you talk about strategy, it's not just creating value, but you have to capture that value. So these are the type of calculations we did at the time. But there was also a focus. For every dollar we would spend, is it better spent in Nigeria or Ethiopia? And at the time, Nigeria, by the way, is a bigger country than Ethiopia, higher mobile penetration, more conducive regulation. So the calculation was simply, at the time, a dollar spent in Nigeria is better than a dollar spent here. And we thought that we can come back to this market at a later date when things were a little bit different, such as now. Yeah.
Amazing.
But the data, very good question. We do create and capture a lot of data, some of it used, but if you're referring to kind of data science and using that data to innovate, to create more value and so forth, we're not there yet, but it's definitely something we want to look towards.
This has been a hugely, hugely interesting conversation and very practical, very insightful. I'm very, very grateful, Adam, for what you've shared. If there was one final word that you would say to us as we leave this place, like I said, there's a room full of people who I believe are going to be the game changers in this country, set up businesses that employ hundreds of thousands of people. and you had the opportunity to say one thing, what would you say to them?
Just do it. Just do it, because, you know, the other thing I thought when I moved back here 16 years ago was, what's the worst case? Worst case was I'd fall flat on my face, lose all my money, and have to pack up and go back. But even that was great, because you're going to learn, you're not going to have any regrets. Again, I think generally this is a young room, so just do it. You got nothing to lose, you got everything to gain. Worst case, you learn a lot. And it's really inspiring. I mean it, to see all these entrepreneurs. I feel like I've been out of touch a little bit. So yeah, please do it, if not for you, for me, because I love hearing about new businesses. By the way, something I didn't mention is, as Apposit, we've also tried to incubate some businesses. It didn't go quite as far as we wanted, but one of the businesses that we incubated, some of you might know it, is called Deliver Addis.
Oh, wow.
So Feleg, we've been with him since the beginning, and it's really exciting to see where he's gotten to. So I'm really excited by new businesses. So if you're not doing it for yourself, do it for the rest of us that get excited. Yeah.
That's truly amazing. Truly, truly amazing. I think we've heard from two truly fascinating entrepreneurs and individuals. Aaron, who through his skill and hard work is just propelled to an unbelievable position, and that should inspire us. And then Adam here, who is at the leading in his industry, has transformed things. Can we just hear it one more time for both of them? I'm sure they'd be happy to answer questions and chat to you a bit more. If not, maybe... I'm sure they'd be happy to answer questions and chat to you a bit more. If not, maybe feel free to stick around. Detail. Like I say, there's people in the room that could open doors. The networking aspect is a hugely rich aspect, so don't lose that. If you filled out the sheets, please hand them on. They really do help us. But otherwise, I just want to say a massive, massive thank you to all of you for coming today, to our guests, and hope you have a wonderful evening. So thank you very much.